Welcome to 2012. I'm Michael Schur. You're watching the Young Turks Network. We are pleased to be joined. I guess Alec Baldwin has hosted Saturday Night Live now more than anyone else, surpassing Steve Martin. So when you go to answer your 2012 trivia question list, who has been on this show the most in its short life, it would be Julian Bond. Julian, thanks for joining us on the show.
I rank right up there at the top.
Yeah, you and Alec Baldwin. Julian Bond, for those of you who don't know, is the chairman emeritus of the NAACP, a veteran of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, all the way up through today, really. And he's going to sit in with us. We're going to talk to him about 2012 issues. Among them, really, is voter fraud, the idea of not allowing people to vote, restricting the ballot box, taking the franchise away from people, making it more difficult. This is somebody who spent a good portion of his life making it easier for people to vote. So he's somebody who whose insight to this issue is invaluable to our audience. But I invite Julian to talk with us now, to join us in our discussion of the debate last night. For those of you who watched the GOP debate, actually for those of you who haven't, you've probably seen the big moment of that debate, and we're going to watch it here now. Keep in mind, though, that Rick Perry is pushing back against this right now. He's using it to his advantage as a polished politician, which he hasn't really shown himself to be, would do. He's now saying that for every government agency that you want to forget, you can send $5 into my campaign. So if you are interested in forgetting public agencies, like the governor of Texas did last night, you can send $5 for that. The governor of Texas, Rick Perry, will also be on with David Letterman tonight reading his top 10 list. Before we get to those issues, let's watch Governor Rick Perry when asked, or when actually he wasn't even asked about it, when offering up the three agencies that he would like to see eliminated when he becomes president.
I will tell you, it's three agencies of government when I get there that are gone: commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
You need five.
Oh, five, okay. So commerce, education, and the
EPA?
EPA, there you go. No, okay.
Let's talk deposition.
Seriously? Is EPA the one you were talking about? Or?
No, sir. No, sir. We were talking about the agencies of government. EPA needs to be rebuilt. There's no doubt about that.
But you can't name the third one?
The third agency of government, yeah. I would do away with the education, the commerce, and let's see. I can't. The third one I can't. Sorry. Oops.
Well, I mean, Julian, it was painful to watch that.
It was. But, you know, it's painful to watch these debates. This is the 10th one we've had so far. And the people who are contending for the Republican nomination seem like such characters out of some fiction. It's hard to believe that they're really serious people.
You know, underrated in this whole, and this just dawned on me in watching it right now, underrated was how goofy Ron Paul also looked next to him, holding his hand up and talking about the agencies he wants to see done away with, yes. And then almost cueing, egging on Perry to continue as he went on.
Indeed, so I mean, it's hard to believe that these are serious people who've been elected to public office. You ask yourself, how could that have been? How could the voters in whatever state they're from have said, I believe this person ought to be my governor or my senator or my representative or somebody else like that? It's just beyond me.
Yeah, somebody last night tweeted, and I don't know who it was, tweeted something about something to the effect of, it's hard to believe that there was a dumber governor of Texas, which I thought was pretty hysterical. The idea, though, that one, you know, what does this mean? What does this issue mean? What does the fact that he made this mistake mean? A lot of people are saying it means the end of the Perry candidacy. A lot of people are saying that he cannot recover from this. But he was human. I mean, I'm going to take the defend Rick Perry side for a moment. He was human. He made a mistake.
Surely.
He has a lot to memorize standing in front of that.
We have lots of memory lapses, each of us.
Yeah. And so when Rick Perry is standing up there and he forgets something in front of a national audience at something that he is decidedly not very good at. Remember, he was almost going to take himself out of the debate game entirely. Does that mean that he should be eliminated from the process?
Probably not, but it probably does.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he should be, because people do forget. But I think this is it for him. He may struggle a little bit. He may get some money from these $5 people sending in, but I think it's over for him. Rick Perry's done.
Yeah.
Somebody tweeted last night on the screen, you ought to stick a fork in Rick Perry. He's done.
Yeah, well, apparently people are trying to do that in earnest today. I think, though, that what we did see in the debate last night was that nobody really distinguished themselves. We have a front runner in Mitt Romney that people are lukewarm about calling a front runner, and we have this handful of also-rans who are not really distinguishing themselves as an opponent to Mitt Romney.
And you know the thing about Romney, the other candidates and other people have accused him of switching his positions on several things. And last night, he switched his position again. He was talking about Rick Perry. He switched his position, or Herman Cain rather, he switched his position on Herman Cain. Day before yesterday, he was saying these charges are serious against Herman Cain. Last night he said it's not a big deal.
Right.
Let Herman Cain deal with it. And I've been keeping a record. He switched his position on gay rights, on stem cells, on capital gains taxes, on the 2000 stimulus, on health care, on gun control, on climate change and abortion, and then at the debate, once again. So
you're better than Rick Perry, Julian Bond. You remembered well, you have it written down. Well, he looked at his notes too.
He obviously didn't have it written down.
We didn't get an oops moment out of you. No, it's very true. I mean, Mitt Romney, but that is sort of, thematically, that's what Mitt Romney's candidacy has been about. I mean, he is trying to disavow his record as a governor of Massachusetts as he seeks the nomination for president as a Republican.
Right. He tried to chide one of the questioners last night for even bringing up the Massachusetts health care.
Yeah. I was shocked by that. You brought up Herman Cain, and I think going into that debate last night, we all thought that the main focal point would be how would Herman Cain deal with the allegations that were brought against him by these women. And it seems to be only the tip of the iceberg, or certainly there seem to be more to come. Coming out of the debate, Rick Perry stole that spotlight, and some people think that then Joe Paterno stole the spotlight from Rick Perry. Yeah. So that was a lucky moment for him. Let's listen to Herman Cain first when he is asked. Now, it was not the first question asked to Herman Cain. Maria Bartiromo of CNBC asked other questions about business. This was about business and finance and the economy, and he was able to bring out 999. It would have been totally awkward not to have heard anything about the allegations. Here's Maria Bartiromo bringing it up, and to the dismay of the audience.
In recent days, we have learned that 4 different women have accused you of inappropriate behavior. Here we're focusing on character and on judgment. You've been a CEO.
Yes.
You know that shareholders are reluctant to hire a CEO where there are character issues. Why should the American people hire a president if they feel there are character issues?
The American people deserve better than someone being tried in the court of public opinion based on unfounded accusations. That's what that's about.
So it seems, that these audiences, that we've seen these audiences behave in bizarre ways along the way.
Yes, they applauded a gay soldier on the front lines in Iraq. They applauded somebody dying because he couldn't get health care.
Yeah.
They applauded Rick Perry for this enormous number of people he's put in the electric chair. And then last night, they booed the questioner for asking a question they don't like. So the audience is as much a participant in these debates as the people themselves are.
And I found it curious, too, because this is not an audience filled with Herman Cain supporters. This is an audience that somehow feels that it's Democrats behind the issuing of the rousing up of these women.
Well, you have to think they've adopted Cain's argument that this is all made up by the Democrats, or Rick Perry. Can't be both, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the audience buys into that, and the audience, I think, lives in a conspiratorial world. They think evil forces are out to get them, and anything they can do to support the people they believe are under attack, including Herman Cain, they'll do.
And we've seen that idea supported in the aftermath, or I guess in the wake of the allegations being released. Mm-hmm. And you saw Ann Coulter, you saw other operatives in the Republican Party calling it a high-tech lynching and all of that. The same conspiratorial defenses that you hear constantly.
At the same time, the patronizing defenses, Ann Coulter talking about our blacks.
Yeah, well,
she has this group of blacks, and the Democrats have this other group of blacks, and her blacks are better than those blacks.
And maybe even better than Donald Trump's blacks.
Yes,
he's always been good to the blacks. So we had then a response from Mitt Romney, and this goes back to what you alluded to earlier with Romney changing his stripes certainly on the Herman Cain issue. Let's hear from Mitt Romney.
When you were at Bain Capital, you purchased a lot of companies. You could fire the CEO and the management team, or you could keep them. Would you keep a CEO? Are you persuaded by what Mr. Kaine has said? Would you keep him on if you had bought his company?
Look, Herman Cain is the person to respond to these questions. He just did. The people in this room and across the country can make their own assessment. I'm not going to.
What's so interesting, just a day or so ago, he was saying these are serious charges. Herman Cain has to answer them. He has to tell us what's happened. He has to be more expansive. And now he's saying not a big deal.
Right.
Or he can handle it himself. I don't have to say anything.
He wants to be the diplomat,
Yeah.
and that's what you're seeing from Mitt Romney along the way. I mean, he is the front runner. He's behaving like the front runner, but it's not as if there's this passion behind his front runnerness.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be another person who gets into this race?
Well, you keep thinking, keep seeing these little notices. Maybe Sarah Palin will come in, somebody else, maybe the Florida Bush, the other Bush.
Jeb Bush, who I've said from the very beginning. I've said from the very beginning that Jeb Bush is going to get into this race, and I feel like he is one of only a handful of people that could actually walk away with this race, with the nomination, and perhaps the presidency, but I think just the nomination.
Yeah, I don't know. None of us knows if somebody else will come in, but it seems like it's begging for somebody to come in.
Yeah.
The electorate, though, the Republican electorate at least says, we're not happy with these people. Nobody gets over 35%, and you can't run a campaign for president with only 35% of the electorate.
And you've seen fewer than 30% in most of the polls. So the outliers are as much as 35. Okay, we've covered the debate. I think substantively very little came out of this debate, although a lot of people in the business world seemed enthralled by what some of the discussions were yesterday with tax plans, with talking about Italy and Greece. I mean, Italy took up a lot of space in this debate. Nobody, and John Huntsman maybe was the one to address it most succinctly, but nobody really had a solution to how to deal with Europe other than not to bail them out, and then to equate bailing out these other countries as TARP money, as if every time we bail out another country or a bank or anything, it has to do, it comes back to the Obama administration in some way, shape, or form.
Everything about these candidates is don't do it. Don't raise taxes. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. Don't have Obamacare. Wipe out everything that's been done. Repeal the New Deal. Just no, 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 and I don't think that's good enough for the American people.
Well, and as we said before, nobody seems terribly passionate about any of these people just yet. But let's go back to Election Day a few days ago. There was a big, there were a handful of elections held around the country, but one that I want to talk to you most about is what happened in Mississippi. And what happened in Mississippi is an example of what's happening all over the country in different states, but they're trying to make it more difficult for Americans to vote. It is precisely the most un-American thing that can be done. Now, as somebody who spent a good portion of his life, I mean, maybe the majority of your life, when you were out on the front porches in Mississippi and when you were in the streets of Alabama and Georgia and Washington trying to get people to vote, trying to get people the right to vote. How does this strike you specifically, and then what can America do about this now?
America can, after having said the Republicans are just saying no, now America can say no to this attempt by Republicans to impose these awful, awful restrictions on the electorate and saying you have to have this kind of ID, you have to have that kind of ID, you have to do this, you can't vote early, you can't have your path to the voting booth eased. As we've been trying to ease it since 1965, since the passage of the Voting Rights Act, all of a sudden in the Republican Party, they've been seized with reversing all of these gains we've made at great cost, at the cost of human life. And I hope that people in the country will just say, no, we can't have this. We can't do it. Unfortunately, in Mississippi, for the first time, the electorate voted to impose these restrictions on voters. At the same time, in Mississippi, they were voting not to impose these draconian anti-abortion regulations on women. So it's difficult to understand exactly what was happening there, but this was a bad day for voting in Mississippi, and it has been a bad day for voting all over the country, except in Maine.
Yeah, well, there were contradictory elections actually there and in Ohio, and those things always boggle my mind. But going to Mississippi, Mississippi was overwhelming. It wasn't a slight. It was we almost beat them back. We almost beat them back. This was a whipping. What can be done in a coalesced way, the way you did it, the way a movement happens, to see this changed? It seems like it's under the radar. And that's
It is
problematic.
on the radar. I think it hasn't caught the attention of the mainstream population in America, or I hope this is not true. They may have bought into the Republican argument that fraud is widespread in American elections. And you know, there's no evidence anywhere that fraud is widespread in American elections. Yeah. And to suspect that it is to believe that some Americans have been stealing elections for decades and decades and decades. And that simply is not the case. No one can prove it to be so. No one can offer any proof of it. And I'd be very much surprised if anybody can come forward tomorrow and say, listen, here, it happened right here.
You know, when I go to vote, I'm often shocked by the fact that they don't ask me for anything, that I'm not asked for any ID. I go in, I say I'm Michael Schur, and I sign, and it always dawned on me that, you know, why am I not being asked to vote? Well, they have my signature on file. They can match my signature to my signature. But the idea that there are people that can't get those IDs, that don't have them, that are less likely to have them, and that there are IDs that have been accepted up until now, like student IDs, that are no longer going to be accepted.
You know, here's some information from the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University School of Law. It costs up to $100 for a driver's license. It costs up to $45 for a birth certificate, and you can't use a birth certificate that doesn't have your picture on it. It costs up to $97 for a passport, and it costs up to $200 for naturalization papers, some of which these identifications aren't good for you to go to the polls and vote. Right. So to erect these barriers means that an enormous population, about 10% of our population, is going to be denied the right to vote simply because they don't have access to these things, don't have driver's licenses, don't have picture IDs, and as long as they don't have them, they can't vote. This is a horrific situation.
It's a horrific situation, and also, I mean, it cannot be underscored how horrific it is. I was repeating what you said, but I mean, I have to repeat it with emphasis. This is, I think, one of the most backwards public corrections to happen in my lifetime is what they're trying to do to the electorate right now. But by the same token, there doesn't seem to be an opposition.
There is an opposition. The NAACP and a series of other civil rights groups and labor organizations are mobilizing to protest this around the country. The Department of Justice has looked at some of these laws, and some states have just been passed, and you hope that they'll find them to be restrictive and therefore unconstitutional and illegal. But it takes the people to rise up.
I was going to say, it doesn't feel grassrootsy yet.
It's not grassrootsy yet, but hopefully it will be. Ben Jealous of the NAACP, its CEO, said a couple of days ago that he's leading a massive coalition of interest groups to do what they can about this, to roll this back, because it's got to be rolled back, or else we won't have an election in the country in which all the people are allowed to participate. And that's the basis of our democracy, everybody participating.
I'll let you have the final word. Julian Bond, thank you for being with us on the show again, our first live guest on 2012, and we hope to have you back to talk about these issues and maybe a little bit more about what the...
Don't have Steve Martin.
Don't have Steve. We won't have Steve Martin. You know, listen, if Shelley Pingree, who's going to be on with us later, decides she wants to come back next week in studio, you got to run for your money.
There you go.
All right, back with more on 2012.
Senator Santorum, you won the Iowa caucus 4 years ago in 10 other states, but you failed to beat Mitt Romney for the nomination. And no one here tonight is going to question your conviction or for your love for country. But has your moment passed, Senator?
I would say the message that got us the win in Iowa and 10 other states against pretty overwhelming odds is the message that's going to deliver us in this election. You know, we didn't start out 4 years ago at the top of the heap. We were behind where we were today, but we stuck to our message. We stuck to the fact that Americans are tired of Washington corporate interests and Democrats who are interested in just politics and power, and they're looking for someone who's going to fight for them, looking for someone who's going to grow the manufacturing sector of our economy. So those 74% of Americans who don't have a college degree or have a chance to rise again, someone who's going to stand up and be very clear with our enemies as to the lines they're going to draw and stand with them. I've got a track record. The reason I did so well last time is not just because of the vision. It's because I have a track record in Washington, D.C. of getting things done. Iran sanctions. The Iran sanctions that brought them to the table, those are sanctions that we put in place when I was in the United States Senate, and a whole host of other things that put me in a position of saying, I only have a great vision, but I can govern effectively in Washington.
Thank you, Senator.